It's December 9, Ukraine Media Center starts its operation. My name is Svetlana Kyiienko, and now we will be talking about winter support and other programs of Ministry of Social Policy aimed to support the population. Joining us in the studio is Tetiana Kiriienko, Deputy Minister of Social Policy of Ukraine, and Oleksandr Maletskyi, Deputy Chairman of the Board of the Pension Fund of Ukraine for Digital Development, Digital Transformations, and Digitalization. Good morning. And Mr. Tetiana, a question to you. How many Ukrainians have taken advantage of the opportunity to get a free 1,000 hryvnia as a winter support, and does the demand correspond with the expectations of the ministry? Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I wanted to remind you that upon the task of the President, the Ministry of Social Policy developed a package of the winter support activities. First of all is the support for the most vulnerable categories of population, a payment in amount of 6,500 hryvnia, and winter support in amount of 1,000 hryvnia, aiming at support a larger categories of populations. It is accessible for all of the citizens of Ukraine, no matter their age. Talking about 1,000 support, I have fresh figures here. We have currently more than 1,500,000 applications, and comparing to the last year, the figure has grown. Well, before it was 14 million. The applications still can be submitted until the 24th of December, and we understand that it's not yet the end. We expect to see more applications, and we're preparing to have them satisfied, because the biggest question is whether the funds will be sufficient. But let me reassure you, everyone will be able to get their support in amount of 1,000 hryvnia. Talking about our support for more vulnerable categories of population, I would like to say that currently we have about 342,000 such applications, and the first tranche was extended on Saturday, and currently we have already paid 117 million hryvnia. And let me remind you, the applications can be submitted until the 17th of December. Also, please be reminded that this winter support is aiming at vulnerable categories of population. Specifically, those are the children from the families with more than 3 children, children with disabilities, children from the temporarily occupied territories, the children of the IDPs, and the pensioners, which are the categories which are eligible for 6,500 hryvnia support, so they can spend it on warm clothing, vitamins, medicines, and some similar things. Did you keep track of what do Ukrainians spend that support for? For 6,500, we have already determined categories of goods, but we haven't collected the statistics so far. But when it comes to 1,000, the leaders are the utility services. 4.5 million people have spent their 1,000 to pay for utility services. Then come the pharmacies and donations to the armed forces of Ukraine. So the Ukrainians continue donating, and that's marvelous. Thank you, Mr. Tetiana. Mr. Oleksandr, according to the data from the Pension Fund of Ukraine, how many applications have you gotten for 6,500 hryvnia support? Well, the figures were already announced. It's almost 350,000 applications, but at the same time, the categories of the population who don't have DIA installed, they can apply through the service centers of the Pension Fund of Ukraine. The process is still underway. the applications can be submitted until the 17th of December. And we see no critical errors on the way. When it comes to statistics, it was properly said the statistics can be only gathered when we extend all of the funds and after the expiration of the period of 180 days. But again, the eligible categories of goods, those 6,500 can be spent and were announced too. So let's keep track of it. Well, now the Ukrainians have gotten used to submitting applications through DIA, but okay, if a Ukrainian submitted such an application but was refused in DIA, what should they do next? Well, first of all, they need to find out whether that person falls under eligibility categories, because we have two different kinds of support, 1,000 and 6,500. 1,000 covers almost all of the population, but in case of 6,500, that's a very specific kind of support that is aiming at vulnerable categories of population, such as children, children from the families with multiple kids, or the disabled. So we have to understand that those people, first of all, they fall under those vulnerable categories. If they don't fall under such categories, they are not entitled to such aid, and they can verify their status with the pension fund of Ukraine, and then to try to find out what are the reasons for the refusal. The aid is extended according to the list. If someone somehow didn't end up on that list, if they cannot find themselves on that list, they should address the service center of the pension fund of Ukraine to find out the reasons why could it happen so. But again, please make sure if you apply for that aid, you have to make sure you fall under those categories, vulnerable categories of population. Okay, can that money be transferred only to a card, or can those funds be obtained like physically through, say, through a cash desk of a bank? Well, as a developer of this legislation, you cannot get any kind of aid in cash, because those money, they contemplate such a mechanism that you get that money to a special card, either through DIA application. That applies both to 1,000 and 6,500 hryvnia, but in case of 1,000, that's a national cashback card. I'll jump a little bit forward. In coordination with the colleagues from Ministry of Digital Transformation and Ministry of Economy, we were consciously selecting this platform of national cashback because currently we have more than 12 million such cards opened, and that facilitates the procedure of extension of this amount of 1,000 hryvnia aid. Because one of the goals of this program is also to support Ukrainian manufacturers. And also I wanted to add, when it comes to refusals, in case of 6,500 hryvnia aid, we have a number of refusals, but more than 90% of refusals were the covered applications when the people applied both through DIA and through pension funds. So it was like the same person who was applying twice in the 90% of cases. And to try to improve this mechanism so the applications don't overlap, so to say, but other refusals were related to the difficulties in verifying documents, such as individual taxpayer number or a person's birth certificate. On top of 1,000 and 6,500 hryvnia aid, some more programs were launched by the government. Can you please tell us What are those programs and how are they supposed to be implemented? Yes, we've developed and currently we have other winter support programs in effect. The Ministry of Social Policy, Family and Unity. Well, first of all, our focus is on the frontline territories, on the internally displaced persons and the persons who are still staying in the frontline territories in the area of active combat operations. And currently we were talking with Mr. Oleksandr that there was a technical delay with that 6,500 winter aid, so the people in the frontline territories could get it, those who ended up in the territory of active combat operations. And we were using Ukrposhta to extend that 1,000 amount. That's a mechanism that would allow the mobile teams who come to those territories with pension payments and winter support to be extended. When it comes to the programs, it's first of all for the compensation for utility services payment, the payment for electric power supply, including from alternative sources. And when it comes to the people living in the temporarily occupied territories, we've compensated more than 200 million under this support program, and we've covered 312,000 families. It was 275,000 before, and now it's 312,000. Let me remind you, it's a monthly compensation, 100 kilowatts per person or 300 kilowatts for one household, which amounts to roughly significant compensation for such regions. And all of the payments are made by a pension fund. So if the payment was not made, citizens may apply to service centers of the pension fund to find out what were the reasons. There was another program also launched for winter period for those people who use solid fuel, those who don't use electric power for heating, but rather and other sources, but rather a solid fuel. The first program was implemented back in September with the help of our partners, UNHCR, OCHA humanitarian organization, all of the 9 frontline regions in the area of 10 kilometers away from the front line. They got a payment from donors for solid fuel, and currently the figures that we got from the pension fund are more than 300,000 households who were covered by this aid from international donors at the cost of our foreign partners. When it comes to the state budget, the program of the Ministry of Social Policy for IDPs, those who are eligible for subsidies and exemptions for utility services, if they don't fall under the foreign donors program, if they move around Ukraine, and currently we see the flow of such people intensifying, they are eligible to aid in amount of 8,000 hryvnia, even if they moved from the frontline territory, say to the center of Ukraine or to the west of the country. The pension fund after the 10th of December is supposed to get the list of such people which were not provided to the foreign donors, and the state will support such citizens in amount of 8,000 hryvnia so they could procure solid fuel for heating wherever they stay across Ukraine. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Do you have any questions to our guests? Well, in case we don't have any questions, I would like to thank you, Ms. Tetiana, and you, Mr. Oleksandr. Let me remind you, we were discussing the winter support programs by the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine, and Ukraine Media Center will continue its operation at 12 6:30, and we will talk about the reconstruction of the power facilities of Ukraine. Thank you. Have a good day.